Let me appreciate the words of the Dean of the African Heads of Mission in South Africa, Your Excellency Andre Zapayeke. Thank you very much for your very Pan-Africanist grounding of your contribution and the leadership that you provide to the African Heads of Missions in South Africa. Let me also acknowledge eminent persons present here today, former members of the South African Foreign Service, Ambassador Mandise Mphalwa. I have insisted that I need to get your script because you have also been assigned at a particular stage working as within the G20, especially the Sherpa track. So the epoch are different, but the challenges obviously remains the same. Mr. Brian Horo, that are present here, Jason Braganza from Afrodat, the executive director, and then the C20 South African chairperson, Tolani Tsefuta. Thank you very much for all the distinguished panelists that actually have joined us. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, our G20 presidency takes place within a particular epoch, and I think importantly for us to appreciate that we are also celebrating 70 years of the Bandung Conference, where we have outlined what Pan-Africanism means, and Bandung really solidify Afro-Asian solidarity, but more importantly, the principles of sovereign equality, mutual respect, and non-interference in the domestic affairs of countries. These principles that we continue to adhere to engage bilaterally with sister countries across the world, but in particular on the African continent. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, the importance of your sub-regional organizations cannot be overemphasized. Our G20 presidency takes place within the context that South Africa have assumed the deputy chairpersonship of SADC, meaning that we are the member of the SADC Troika, and South Africa will chair the SADC in 2026. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, that this unique engagements under the stewardship of SALO that we are having here today should probably define as one of the key progressive stakeholders what should be the broad agenda points that the South African chairship of SADC should pursue. I'm making this, ladies and gentlemen, because we evidently have seen the increased prevalence and contributions of non-state actors within the realm of foreign policy. Although of late it has been more negative, where there has been dissonance and distortions, obviously, of South Africa's domestic affairs elsewhere. And it's for this reason that your more progressive non-state actors should be supported. And it's obviously for this particular reason that we are here to grace this occasion. The third aspect, ladies and gentlemen, which I thought I should report to you is that in concurrence to the SADC Troika leadership, We have also assumed the leadership of the South African Customs Union, SACU. Now, as we are converging here today, the South African government is seized with the task of reimagining SACU, so that these five countries that comprise of SACU should be repurposed, the relationship economically, to benefit South Africa, but also, ladies and gentlemen, to serve as a catalyst for economic diplomacy in the broader SADC region and in Africa. I'm raising this, Dean of the African Diplomatic Heads of Missions, because as we speak, we don't have one of the regional economic communities, your RECs, that have rectified actually, that have actually completed its tariff offerings to the ACFTA Secretariat. The closest that RECs have actually come was through the SACU, who have completed its tariff offerings to the ACFTA Secretariat. So the fact that SADC, for example, is our immediate sub-national organization, has not been able to submit its tariff offerings, implies that SADC, together with all other RECs, a very important and unique work to be done in the future. Because when we speak about the ACFTA, ladies and gentlemen, which obviously comes from the Abuja Treaty and the Lagos Plan of Action, and which is really the instruction note and mechanism for the implementation of economic integration. You can't do economic integration without the presence of your regional economic communities. The last aspect that I want to raise is that we have seen a very successful piloting of the Pan-African payment and settlement system in West Africa as mandated by the African Union Commission. As we converge here, ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed that we had 18 countries that have actually entered the and that have signed on to the Pan-African payment and settlement system. 5 of the top 10 economies on the African continent have entered the payment and settlement system. That includes countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Algeria, Morocco. South Africa is not there, ladies and gentlemen, out of the 18, although we are really the torchbearer of the ACFTA through the Secretary General of the Secretariat. Now, Ambassador, you know very well the sensitivity of the markets, and that settlement and currency matters, it obviously matters within the purview of the South African Reserve Bank. But what it requires, ladies and gentlemen, it's multiplicity of engagements with and amongst your business formations about the centrality of South Africa subscribing and actually buying into the settlement system. If we don't do that, ladies and gentlemen, we are obviously not going to be able to recalibrate our economy as we should. And it goes without saying that as we speak, the size of our economy is approximately 7 trillion rand. We require this economy to grow, ladies and gentlemen, and you can only grow amidst the current poly crisis if we use the ACFTA as a catalyst for that type of a growth. But be it as it may, ladies and gentlemen, we have made a commitment that the G20 presidency will substantively be an African presidency, given the fact that we are privileged that during this year, the African Union have actually taken its rightful place alongside that of the European Union in the G20. We have obviously made our four strategic priorities, our high-level deliverables and task force to be uniquely focused on the African continent in particular, Ambassador, but in the global South generally. And it's for this reason that the matters of the emerging markets has been central in relation to what we achieved during the Leaders Summit in November. And our approach obviously follows that of Brazil, of India and Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, because this has been really the three countries that were key in terms of cementing the global development agenda, in particular for the global South and your developing economies and your emerging markets. We do anticipate, ladies and gentlemen, that the US will continue to participate in particular in the finance track, where their participation really has been steep. During the G20 foreign ministers on the margins of UNGA 80, the US, of course, has participated, given the centrality of the Sherpa track. So we do suggest to you that the presence, obviously, of the Vice President of the USA will obviously cement the role that the G20 plays and the obligations, ladies and gentlemen, that they also impose on all its members, including, obviously, the United States of America. However, responding to the question raised by SALO, because SALO has been clear of that we should look at whether this G20 will conform to what South Africa wants, but equally so what the African Union wants. The AU Commission have highlighted obviously 6 key priorities, ladies and gentlemen. And I must indicate those 6 priorities is reconcilable with our task force high-level deliverables and strategic outcomes. The first priority was the advancement of the African Union Agenda 2063 and the second 10-year implementation plan, and of course the critical importance of pursuing the UN's SDG goals. The second issue was the reform of the international financial architecture. The third aspect spoke about international food and security and agriculture, followed by just energy transition, trade and investment, and health and vaccine manufacturing. What we have done, ladies and gentlemen, to practicalize our commitment to the African continent, the second high-level deliverables, which speaks about task force on food security, we convened it in Egypt during September 2025. The G20 compact with Africa 2.0 took place, ladies and gentlemen, on the margins of the 8th session of the AU's Specialized Technical Committee on Finance, Monetary Affairs, Economic Planning and Integration in Johannesburg, and it just concluded recently on the 3rd of October. We further anticipate that Nigeria will host, ladies and gentlemen, a very important discussion on industrialization and agriculture in October. And the high-level meeting entitled Debt and the Cost of Capital in partnership with the finance track will be hosted in Ethiopia in October 2025. Algeria have made an undertaking, ladies and gentlemen, that they are ready, obviously, to host a high-level engagement session. So we sought really to practicalize our commitment to the African continent. We do so, ladies and gentlemen, understanding the importance of African social agency and deepening Pan-Africanism amidst this polycrisis, which the Secretary General Antonio Guterres have substantively outlined during the plenary session of UNGAID. The important issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that 5 years to 2030 towards the attainment of SDG goals, we have only reached 70% of the goals. And it is for this reason when one of our thematic approaches speaks about the central topology of sustainability, speaks really about the implementation of plans to ensure that we meet the SDG targets. Ladies and gentlemen, we are convinced in South Africa, and we have said that to our partners within the G20, that our thematic approach that speaks about the importance of solidarity, the importance of equality and sustainability, seek to bring along all members, not only within the G20 family of nations, but also those countries that are part of your less developed economies, that are part of your developing economies outside of the G20 family. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, Africa should be at the epicenter of our G20 presidency. It is for this reason that we have continued to place at the center the international financial architecture. We continue to speak about development finance and the importance to transform your global economic governance aspects. We are elated, ladies and gentlemen, to report to all of you that President Ramaphosa launched in August 2025 the Extraordinary Committee of Independent Experts on Global Wealth Inequality, chaired by the Nobel laureate, Professor Joseph Stiglitz. And for the first time, it means the issue about inequality does not become a subordinate matter, ladies and gentlemen, of the G20, but will really look at the systematic issues that reflects the world economy. Another key landmark, ladies and gentlemen, or initiative or outcome from our presidency, of course, is the G20 Africa Cooperation Agenda, which seeks to build on the AU Agenda 2063, and it's aligned with the ACFTA. Its intention, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously to provide a framework or outline for investment in Africa's most productive sectors, such as in the health sectors, infrastructure, and of course, the digital economy. The implementation, ladies and gentlemen, of our very collaborative, productive approach as it relates to infrastructure investment seeks to underpin and amplify local pharmaceutical manufacturing, to the issue about agriculture modernization, Three, the issue about green industrialization. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, the key matter about critical minerals and value addition as it relates to those issues is concerned. Coupled to this, ladies and gentlemen, has been the work South Africa together with Germany as co-chairs has done, including with the African Union Commission to champion and broaden the Compact with Africa initiative. And that initiative, ladies and gentlemen, it's of course reconcilable with the second 10-year implementation plan of the African Union. And it looks specifically on the central matter of economic policy implementation, in particular the issues about industrialization of the African continent and our trading relationship and the diversification of the trading relationship, not only, of course, of South Africa, but also, of course, other African countries. Any debate, ladies and gentlemen, at G20 that does not speak about cost of capital will be a weak debate. So when we speak about cost of capital, of course, we have to look at the conduct of your credit rating agencies. How do we envisage your credit rating agencies that has been established? How do they partner and work with the APRM, for example? How do they work with our own Pan-African credit rating agency to better lower the cost of capital to countries on the African continent in particular? It is for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, that the work that former Minister Trevor Manuel are doing should be commended in his capacity as the chairperson of the G20 African Expert Panel, tasked with specifically investigating the factors that leads and contribute towards the impediment of growth and development on the African continent. And they have also been mandated to reflect deeply on the cost of capital and recommendations to the G20. We expect the panel to produce a high-level report with key recommendations in November 2025, ladies and gentlemen. That is obviously important given our own experience with the special drawing rights issued by the International Monetary Fund, in particular during COVID-19 pandemic, and the need to ongoingly reform the multilateral development banks, ladies and gentlemen, which include, of course, your World Bank. Our submission in terms of the detail that will come from the finance track is that South Africa's G20 presidency has uniquely been able to advance the agenda of the African continent and that of the global south, broadly speaking. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, debt sustainability for low-income countries is a key aspect on our agenda of the G20. Having said that, we are obviously looking on the common framework for debt treatments, ladies and gentlemen, whilst simultaneously championing climate resilient debt clauses. Because our anticipation as South Africa, of course, is that the current debt arrangements with a number of African states have further impeded, ladies and gentlemen, the capacity of African states to be developmental in nature, given the fact that its debt obligations then place on the back further in development, investment in education, health, and insulating Africa individual states from climate disasters. Ladies and gentlemen, building on our own experience in South Africa as it relates to your just energy transition, we do anticipate working with the G20, but of course also within the broader conference of the parties approach, that the matter about climate financing for just energy transition pathways will be key and critical. So we are pursuing financing, ladies and gentlemen, that are concessional based, financing that are predictable, but more importantly, financing that should be aligned to the national development strategic agenda of different countries. On critical minerals, ladies and gentlemen, we do anticipate that the medium-term budgetary policy statement in November, mid-November, will set the firm basis for what our anticipation is for the leadership summit that will convene 2 weeks thereafter. Because of market sensitivity, I will pause there as it relates to critical minerals. But safe to say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a particular dilemma on the African continent where we subscribe to Pan-Africanism, but not necessarily do in our actions live and becomes the embodiment of African solidarity. For example, on green and critical mineral strategy, the AU Commission in December 2024 produced its own critical minerals framework strategy. All 55 members of the African Union, ladies and gentlemen, have been mandated to domesticate this critical mineral strategy. All regional economic communities were supposed to develop a regional critical mineral strategy within the context of the REC. In May 2025, South Africa announced its own critical mineral strategy. As we are speaking, as a member of the SADC Troika, SADC, ladies and gentlemen, does not have a critical mineral strategy. And I'm suggesting is an important dilemma for the African continent, for us also in SADC, because if we identify critical minerals to be a positive contributor towards alternative and green technologies, you need to understand the mineral complex of your critical minerals. And I think we invite, of course, SALO and a number of partners to work with South Africa, in particular during the processes leading up to the SADC chairship, so that at least there should be some elementary work that we do, obviously working with the SADC Secretariat on the development of a critical mineral strategy for SADC. So this is a key issue within the agenda of our G20 presidency. I'm raising it, ladies and gentlemen, because we have seen the G20 came up with a different initiative to that of the Kimberley process, the G7 initiative, especially as it relates to diamonds is concerned. And I'm saying it's it's a unique initiative because if you look at the G7 nations, you actually only have one key diamond producing state, Ambassador. It's Canada. And South Africa, through SADC, must ensure, for example, that Botswana have a critical mineral strategy, given its mineral complex and obviously the DRC and every other country. But be it as it may, ladies and gentlemen, I think as I conclude, the issues about artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and data governance, it's important for the success of our presidency, the success of the transformation of the African economy that should be obviously transformative in nature and should be mindful of the innovation and the solutions which digital payment system present to the African continent. We are suggesting, ladies and gentlemen, that having the African Union along with us will ensure that the development agenda of as set out by the AU Commission, when the AU Commission speaks about the importance of modernization of its agricultural economy, when the AU Commission speaks about the pitfall of illicit financial flows, that those issues, ladies and gentlemen, in partnership with the African Union, we do suggest that we will be able to have ministerial declarations and outcomes documents. We do anticipate, of course, that there will be some areas of divergence, especially when we look at the matter about price volatility. And it may just result in, with those particular areas on the Commission of Chair statements at the Leaders Summit in November. Ladies and gentlemen, we obviously thought this is the high level report back. Actually is a report back that I'm giving to you. This is the last report which the Cabinet have received from the Inter-Ministerial Committee, the IMC, on the G20. And obviously since that time there has been work done, like I've said, especially at UNGA 80. So we'll continue to take SALO into confidence on key developments, but I hope we have also outlined some important responsibilities because any relationship, ladies and gentlemen, it has rights and duties, isn't it so? And one of the responsibilities of non-state actors such as SALO is to work with South Africa to ensure the repository of wisdom that we have around the table will ultimately find expression on the Leaders Summit. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, at the Social Summit, which we are convening in early November. So we hope, Mayor Dlamini, that SALO will be one of the important non-state actors that will be represented on the table of the G20 Social Summit. We have opened up the request for proposals, and we hope that you have been as agile as when National Treasury issues request for proposals for tenders, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much.